Welcome into Path to the Playoffs. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. This is where we talk about all the potential scenarios of how the Bucs get into the playoffs. It's been an interesting one this year, a little bit different than other years where it was always, well, if this and then this and then this, and this time it's you win the NFC South. That's kind of the plan. That's the plan here. So tell us, if the playoffs were to start today, what the situation would be, and then maybe we'll get into also the idea of these next 3 games, the significance and potential scenarios there.
I look back at Sunday when you and I were doing the pregame show down here in the end zone, and there were breaks, and we were watching Atlanta against New Orleans and Carolina against Pittsburgh. Both games were close. We wanted Atlanta and Carolina to lose, and they both did, which was great. So you went into that game thinking, hey, we beat the Bengals. We got a 2-game lead with 3 to go. Unfortunately, the Buccaneers didn't take care of their own business and lost that game. So what you ended up with New Orleans beating Atlanta, is the Buccaneers still in first place in the NFC South despite a 6-8 record, and all 3 of the other teams are all 5-9. So 3 games to go, 1-game lead. It's a good place to be in. You'd rather be where we are than, say, the Falcons, right. But it still shows you how tenuous it can be. And when it comes down to it, the most important game left on the Bucs schedule is the Carolina game here in week 17, after the Christmas game in Arizona. If the Buccaneers win that game, they have a 98% chance of making the playoffs, no matter what else happens in every other game. If they win that game, and either of the other 2 games, are guaranteed to win the division. So here's a look at the standings. The 3 teams at the top really kind of solidified. I took Minnesota having the greatest comeback in NFL history to do so, but all 3 of those teams won. San Francisco and Philly in fairly easy fashion over their opponents. Those 3 are pretty much locked in as the 1, 2, 3 seeds. San Francisco could potentially catch Minnesota. Dallas still has a chance to beat Philadelphia for the division, but it's not very likely. They definitely would need to beat Philly this weekend, so it's possible Dallas and Philly could switch spots. And the Giants and the Commanders, the Giants are looking a lot better after beating Washington, and they're pretty close to clinching a playoff spot actually at this point. And just not showing on the screen is Seattle, who's 1 game back of that. And then you got teams like Green Bay. I guess Green Bay and Seattle are about the same spot, but they're just barely holding on to that. This is where it stands now, and if it held this way, again, like we said last week, what you're going to end up with is the Buccaneers as the NFC South winner getting a home game in the first week of the playoffs against the Dallas Cowboys, who the Buccaneers did beat in week 1.
That's right. And that also, I mean, I think, man, watching the Eagles this year, the chance that them and the Cowboys could swap spots, that would be a tough draw. If that was
the way things have gone for Philly. I mean, they're riding high right now. That would be hard for them.
That's hard to imagine.
It's not really
so it looks most likely to be a Cowboys matchup. So essentially these last 3 games, you talked about the most important thing is beating the Panthers. How about these other couple games, and especially this Sunday against Arizona? What are the significance of these individual games? What is the kind of rank most to least important, and how many of the 3 do you feel like they really need to get?
Well, if the Buccaneers win 2, they're probably going to win the division, because to lose it, they would have to have one of the other teams win 3. And even 2 of those teams, I think only Carolina could, if the Buccaneers win 2 because of their head-to-head sweep over New Orleans, and in this scenario, they're not beating Carolina, that means they did beat Atlanta. They have a head-to-head sweep over Atlanta. So the only real concern if you win 2 games is Carolina winning out. But again, all 4 of these teams are either 6-8 or 5-9.
The odds.
And you don't look at a 6-8, 5-9 team and go, well, they're going to win out, right? I mean, it could happen. But it's not the most likely scenario, right?
Right.
So obviously, you don't have to be a mathematician to know if the Buccaneers win out, since they have a 1-game lead, they're going to win the division. But Carolina is in the same position, because their winning out would involve beating us and then having a tiebreaker over us. So Carolina and the Buccaneers can both win the division by winning out, that whole control your own destiny thing, which is a little bit misleading. But again, as I said a little bit earlier, Carolina at Tampa Bay in week 17 is by far the most important game in what the results for this division will be at the end.
All right, well, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Path to the Playoffs. We hope everybody has a wonderful holiday weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll be back here next week to break down the new playoff scenarios.